In previous videos, we've looked at wrestlers who've performed in different eras such as New Generation and Attitude. But what about those who have crossed over in other phases of WWE by competing in the Ruthless Aggression era and are still in the company to this day to tell the tale? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. And where better to start than with John Cena? After all, as WWE's resident ace since all the way back in the mid-2000s, it seems obvious that John Cena would be one of those performers who crossed eras with ease. Hell, he did it when the period of ruthless aggression the company was undergoing back in the mid to late 2000s gave way to PG, and he did it just as easily when PG gave way to today's new era. Sure, you can't exactly call him a full-timer anymore. No, his Hollywood career and advancing age put a stop to that years ago. But that doesn't mean he won't still show up for the odd match here and there, such as the one he had against Solo Sikoa at November 24th, 2023's Crown Jewel. And it also doesn't mean he won't make a cameo appearance from time to time, like he did when he helped Cody Rhodes to finish his story at WrestleMania 40. In fact, even if he's not keeping a regular schedule anymore, we wouldn't be surprised to see him finally get that elusive 17th world title win before all is said and done. And if he did, that would be the capper on a career which, in many ways, reached its height during the Ruthless Aggression era, as this was the period that saw him rise to the top of the card with his Doctor of Thugonomics character and become the face of the company in a way no one had been able to do since the dual exits of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Yes, even if many live crowds weren't behind Big Match John during the heights of Super Cena in the 2000s, he was always able to deliver when needed. After all, how can we forget about the excellent encounters he had against the likes of Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Edge, just to name a few? And then, of course, there are the numerous iconic moments he gave us by playing up to his more heelish reputation during shows such as One Night Stand 2006. Sure, not everything he did was great during the Ruthless Aggression era, but he was a lot better than many fans gave him credit for at the time. And his underrated in-ring skills have only continued to grow as time has gone on, with him eventually reaching a point in the modern day where classic bouts were commonplace for him. Hell, there's even a chance we might see him mix it up with an old rival of his once more before all is said and done, and give us another 5-star epic in the process. As when it comes to the second half of that equation, his recent return to WWE after almost a decade away has meant he qualifies for today's video too. That's right, it's time to talk about CM Punk. Yes, after leaving AEW in the summer of 2023, and from there making his return to WWE at November 25th's Survivor Series a few months later, he was instantly the biggest thing in the company all over again. And sure, his momentum has since stalled somewhat on account of the tricep injury picked up at the Royal Rumble taking him out of in-ring action for a while, but he's managed to remain a semi-regular presence on TV regardless on account of his ability to cut great promos, usually on his current archenemy, Drew McIntyre. Of course, Punk's greatness on the mic was always evident as far back as his time during the Ruthless Aggression era, as that was when he was first making a name for himself as the rookie star-in-waiting of WWECW, someone who quickly gained the adoration of fans who were desperate for something that felt like an alternative to the prototypical WWE performers present there like Test and Hardcore Holly. And once that was over, and he'd served his time there as the developmental brand's world champion for a while, he'd be moved up in Raw, where he not only became a 2-time Money in the Bank winner, but also a 2-time World Heavyweight Champion. Still not convinced Punk deserves a spot in this video? Well, how about the fact that he was able to do all this while clearly not being someone Vince McMahon would have normally pushed as a big deal? Yes, while it's easy to look around weekly wrestling television today and see a lot of smaller guys, you could make a solid argument that it was the beginnings of Punk's rise to the top during the 2000s which started the ball rolling on a sea change in the industry. A sea change which has allowed the likes of AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, and others to thrive. And if you want more evidence of how great Punk was during the 2000s, then you only have to look at the fact he briefly made a star out of our next subject too, even if this moment technically did come during the beginnings of the PG era. Who was this person? Well, back then they went by the name of Festus, but they've since reverted back to just being plain old Luke Gallows again. That's right, Luke Gallows has managed to maintain a prominent role in the wrestling industry for years now, whether that be as a member of the Bullet Club over in Japan, as one half of the Good Brothers in both Impact and briefly AEW, or in his current role on WWE TV. Yes, as recently as February of 2024, the Good Brothers have been making waves down on NXT as they stake their claim at being tag team champions. And whenever the time comes for them to make an appearance on the main roster, they can usually be counted on to do so by being in the corner of their Bullet Club brother, AJ Styles. But then backing up your buddies is nothing new for Luke Gallows in particular, because back during the Ruthless Aggression era, he was regularly doing this by helping out his partner Jesse, the son of Bam Bam Terry Gordy. No, it wasn't a great character the big man had here, as he was tasked with portraying a seemingly mentally challenged man whose gimmick was that he was entirely unresponsive up until the point the bell rang, at which point he turned into an unkillable monster, but at least it was a foot in the door for him. Yes, for as much as it was a questionable gimmick for Gallows, at least the Maryland native got a chance to recover once he got kayfabe clean from his apparent drug issues and turned into a fully functioning human being again after joining the Straight Edge Society towards the beginning of the next period of the company's history. And this new gimmick of Luke Gallows would be the one he's been able to carry on with all the way up until the present day. But the former Festus isn't the only person who found success in WWE during the Ruthless Aggression era, and who then came back for the current day following a spell elsewhere, as the exact same thing could be said about our next subject, MVP. And in MVP's case, it's also a situation where he gets to take less bumps than ever today, as since coming back to the WWE full-time in 2020, he's been more of a manager than anything else, first to Bobby Lashley in the Hurt Business, and then to Omos. Sure, he'll still hit the ring on occasion, but it seems at this point like his best usage is on the microphone, as while his body may be breaking down as a result of injuries and age, his ability to talk is better than ever. But it wasn't always this way though. No, back during the Ruthless Aggression era, Montel Vontavious Porter was one of the most underrated in-ring wrestlers WWE had at that time, someone who, while he was never exactly a main event player, could always be counted on to have a good match with whoever he was put up against. And this meant that he was always a hit with fans during his feuds against the likes of Matt Hardy and Kane. And it also meant that, like with other true workhorses in the vein of Dolph Ziggler, Arn Anderson, or Mr. Perfect, he could be relied upon to carry a mid-card title, such as the United States strap, and give it credibility, even if he wasn't being treated like the star of the show. Unfortunately for MVP though, no matter how great of a performer he was, his time with WWE would come to an end at the dawn of the PG era, with him going on to spend the next decade or so working for the likes of Impact and Japan, quietly bolstering his resume as he awaited the opportunity to return to his original home of WWE. That said, a side effect of this was that when the Fed came calling once more at the end of the 2010s, he'd be ready to go. And with him looking like he's going to be remaining in WWE for the foreseeable future as they enjoy their biggest wave of success in over 2 decades, we don't expect anything but great things in the Miami native's future. But then we also expect plenty of great things to still come for our next subject too, someone who first really rose to prominence during the Ruthless Aggression era during Tough Enough, and who has remained a constant fixture on WWE television ever since. Who are we talking about here? Why, The Miz, of course. Yes, it was during the Ruthless Aggression era that Mike Mizanin started his career in WWE, with him going on to have everything that the company look for in a superstar, in that he has a good look, can cut a hell of a promo, and is great at making public appearances, whether it be for TV or radio, promoting the WWE as a company ambassador. That's right, whether it be his tag team with John Morrison or his various singles runs during the 2000s, WWE can always count on this Ohio native to do his job to a high standard. Hell, this was exactly why he became a multiple-time tag team champion and also got involved in notable feuds with the likes of D-Generation X while he was at it. No, he wouldn't reach the absolute top of the card during the Ruthless Aggression period. That would come later. And his in-ring highlights against Daniel Bryan were still a ways off yet. But what this initial run represented for Mizanin was a chance to firmly root himself in the WWE system. And this was something he did better than almost anyone else at the time, with him becoming a key figure on TV. And even to this day, Mike Mizanin still has a lot left to offer, because with him being relatively injury-free, there's every possibility he'll be able to continue on in his current role of upper mid-card act for years to come. No, it might not always be as a reunited tag team partner of R-Truth, and it might not always see him in title contention. But if the last few years have shown us anything, it's that The Miz still serves a role in 2024, and because of his malleability as a character, that purpose can range anywhere from him being a tag team partner Logan Paul, all the way to him being a babyface challenger to Gunther's Intercontinental title. That said, while The Miz's ability would mold himself to whatever the situation requires of him will likely always see the guy have a role in WWE, you could argue he'll never be as big of a star as our next subject, someone who's also carried that star power across eras, the one, the only, Randy Orton. Yes, like with The Miz, Randy Orton's first taste of success in the wrestling industry came during the Ruthless Aggression era. In fact, it was here he became the youngest world champion in the company's history. But it wasn't just about winning the world title here, as there was also his excellent run with Evolution, a run which turned him into a made man in the Fed well before he'd even had a chance to hit his late 20s. In fact, you could argue that it was because of the success of Evolution and what came in the immediate aftermath that Randy would be able to maintain a main event spot despite his many backstage issues during the 2000s. Of course, having people like Triple H and Ric Flair there to put in a good word for him could only take the third-generation superstar so far. And had he not been able to bring it in the ring, it's not like he would have been so bulletproof. So it's just as well he was. And this was evident in numerous bouts Orton had during the Ruthless Aggression era, with perhaps the most notable of these being his stellar hardcore brawl with Mick Foley at Backlash 2004, and his iconic showdown with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 21, both of which came during the heights of his Legend Killer gimmick. Of course, you'd think then that with all these high-level matches taking place, the wear and tear on the Viper's body would be bad enough that he'd have to hang up his boots eventually, right? Well, while in a prior era this might have been the case, modern medicine has seen Orton be able to carry on right up until the present day and still keep going strong. In fact, you could argue his recent run as one half of RK Bro was amongst the best things he's done in years. And since returning from a potentially career-ending back injury in late 2023, he's been able to pick right back up where he left off as one of the top babyfaces in WWE, with this being a role he's likely going to be filling for the foreseeable future. Will such a role eventually see the legend finding himself standing across the ring from his old legacy stablemate and current WWE champion Cody Rhodes? It feels inevitable it'll come at some point. And who knows, with there being no other obvious person to currently take the belt off the American Nightmare, it might even be Randy who gets the honor of doing this, taking his number of world title wins up to 15 in the process. But even if he doesn't become world champion again, we're pretty sure Randy still has a lot more left to offer. After all, we've still yet to see him reignite his old feud with our next subject, another figure who succeeded in both the Ruthless Aggression and modern eras, Rey Mysterio. Yes, while Rey has been a legend since as far back as the 90s, that's not to say he wasn't still great during the Ruthless Aggression era of WWE too. As well as knees might have been getting weaker by the day, he was able to have some absolutely legendary feuds there against the likes of Eddie Guerrero and Batista. Then of course there's the fact that in 2006, he finally got his chance to win the World Heavyweight title. And while sure, it might not have been the best title run overall, both the lead up to it, where he won the Royal Rumble after entering at number 2, and the match itself at WrestleMania 22, where he overcame Randy Orton and Kurt Angle, remain iconic enough that they're still being talked about to this day. Unfortunately for the California native though, by the time 2015 came around, he'd be gone from WWE. But it wasn't as if this was the end of the world exactly, because he'd just spend the next few years returning to his lucha roots by working for the likes of AAA and Lucha Underground. But for as much fun as he was no doubt having doing this, in the end, it was always going to be WWE he returned to, as that was his home. And as well as this, he could help get his son Dominic a foot in the door and given a chance to succeed. And this was what led to him re-signing with the company in 2018, where he remains a fixture right up until the present day. Though now he usually finds himself on either the opposite side of the ring from his son, or battling it out with his former LWO proteges Santos Escobar and our next subject, Carlito. Yes, after so long being away from WWE, Carlito would return there in 2023 and be able to carve a nice role for himself on the show going forward. And ever since making his comeback during the Bad Bunny and Damian Priest match at 2023's Backlash, he's been a regular fixture on SmackDown as the man who, up until very recently, was a member of the Latino World Order. Of course, in recent weeks, his alignment has changed as he's turned heel on the LWO, and that came as no surprise for those who remembered the San Juan native from the Ruthless Aggression era specifically, as back then, he often played the role of heel to perfection. With this being exactly why he found so much success there, as a man who not only got to have runs with both the United States and Intercontinental titles in 2004 and 2005, and who got to have notable feuds with the likes of John Cena and RVD in the process, but who also got to play a tag team role with his real-life brother Primo, starting in 2008. Sure, this tag team run would end in tears when he split from Primo at the dawn of the 2010s, but by that point, things were well into the PG era. Of course, with him now back in WWE and a heel once more, the question remains as to how far he will push things this time around. Will he once again find himself in title contention at some point? Well, if he ever does, then there's a good chance he might have to stand on the other side of the ring from our next subject. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but Bobby Lashley? Yes, the Almighty is truly someone who managed to excel in both the ruthless aggression and modern eras, as it was during the former that he first made a splash as a guy who at one point looked like he was being positioned as the next face of the company. And sure, while things might never have played out this way exactly, Bobby still had a hell of a run back then, as not only would he become a two-time WWE CW World Champion, but he'd also get to play a key role in the Battle of the Billionaires at WrestleMania 23. Despite this though, by the time 2008 rolled around, Lashley would have called it a day on his first run with WWE, as for reasons which still aren't fully clear, he asked to be released from his contract at this point. So with him now free to explore new options then, he'd spend the next decade in TNA becoming one of their top stars, with this all eventually leading to him making a triumphant return to WWE in 2018. How would this return go for him? Fantastic as it happened, because following a ropey start which saw him introduce WWE fans to his supposed sisters, he'd really pick up speed by the time early 2021 came around, as, while still a member of the Hurt Business, he defeated The Miz to finally become WWE Champion here. And as if this weren't enough, soon after that he'd walk into WrestleMania 37 as the reigning champ and successfully defend against Drew McIntyre. Sure, it's true that since reaching this height, he's fallen back down to the level of the United States title again, but that doesn't mean we won't see the Kansas native reach the top again before his time is done. After all, while he might be in his late 40s, today that isn't too old at all anymore. And with the shape he's in, there's every chance he'll go on for another decade yet.